For today's review, we'll be reviewing Lost Gravity at Walibi Holland. Now this is quite a unique coaster and feels like nothing else I've ever tried before.
First time?
Yeah.
It is also the special modern looping coaster at the park, a very quirky ride that certainly stands out from the rest of the thrill rides. People generally seem to really like Lost Gravity and often put it up against Goliath for which one is the best number 2 in the park after Untamed. And I've pretty much only heard positive things about Lost Gravity apart from the fact that it is not the smoothest coaster. I personally rode it in July of 2022 and today we're gonna go over a couple of categories so I can explain to you how much I like this ride.
What the hell is even that?
Lost Gravity is a MACK ride's BigDipper. It was the first of its kind. It's a new type of thrill coaster with similarities to like an SNS El Loco and a Gerstlauer Eurofighter, but it's also partially a wing coaster. It just feels very different from those models, even though it's kind of similar. It opened in 2016, and we've since gotten one of these, and we're getting a few more as well, with different layouts, of course. It's got 8 rider cars with 2 rows, which includes 4 wing seats.
I'm a bird.
Very similar to something like Skyrush. And the comfort is similar to any other MACK thrill coaster, meaning it's very comfortable. The seats are great and the lap bars are really good, and there's nothing to complain about in that department.
If you have a complaint, I suggest you submit it through our email system.
It's 105 foot tall, so it's only the 4th tallest in the park and only just barely a mecha coaster. It's also only 2,231 feet long, also making it the 4th longest in the park, but it's really a perfect length for its speed, which is at 54.1 miles an hour. Also only the 4th fastest in the park. It has a solid ride duration of 53 seconds from the release of the lift hill to the final brake run, which is a pretty average ride length. And it's got 2 inversions both in the second half and both of which are pretty awesome. But before we actually go into the layout of this quirky wonky thing, let's talk about how this looks.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
I love the look of Lost Gravity. It just looks incredibly fun. Obviously, it's got this black and yellow color scheme, which is very similar to like Danger Sides and also fits the theme, which we will get into later. It's certainly an eye catcher. And it's also got some great angles you can look at it from, especially this by the water. Generally, it's also a really fun coaster to watch. With that one car running through the elements, it's honestly a pretty entertaining watch. Especially because every now and then, a point of the coaster will burst out fire. You can feel the heat, and the fire is loud. So that only adds to the off-ride experience. This might just be the most entertaining coaster to watch at the park.
It's anti-gravity.
The layout starts out with a 180-degree turnaround into the chain lift hill. This chain lift hill is pretty fast and pushes you straight into a twisted drop. And this is probably the most famous element on Lost Gravity because it is a pretty wild drop. It twists you pretty much 180 degrees, almost vertically down. And I was a little bit disappointed with the drop actually because I expected to get some pretty wild airtime on it, but there's barely any airtime at all. However, this drop has some crazy laterals. On my right, I sat on the left wing seat in the back, and I can tell you, you get yanked to the side going down this drop pretty violently. It definitely feels like you're about to fall out to the side, so this is an awesome lateral full, very crazy drop. That is followed by a small bunny hill, which gives a very quick and very hard pop of ejector airtime, which is fantastic right after that drop. And that throws you into my favorite element on the ride, which is the banked top hat. This is basically a top hat that is banked to the side, sort of reminiscent of a wave turn, and this gives very strong floater airtime all the way through. It doesn't look very impressive on camera, but you are very much out of your seat. It's not quite ejector or flojector, but it is some of the best floater you can get on any coaster, while being sideways, which is of course really fun. That is followed by a camelback, which is also stronger than it looks on camera. It's not ejector airtime, but I would say this is flojector airtime, and it gradually gets stronger through the hill. After that, you also get a good strong floater pop up into this turnaround that is also outer banked, so you get a little bit of laterals going through this turnaround. They're not very strong. It's actually not quite as strong as on like a Wild Mouse, but it's funky, and that's what this ride does so well. Then you have the mid-course brake run, and even though you get slowed down here, it's completely fine because that only makes the next element better, which is a dive drop. This dive drop is done pretty quickly, but you still have plenty of time for some awesome hang time here. You get a solid dose of hang time, and then as soon as it starts going down, it actually whips you through the half loop of the inversion, which brings on some very nice positive forces. After that, you have a twisted ascent, which also gives a fun pop of floater airtime, mixed with a little bit of good laterals as well. At the bottom of this turn, you also get a nice dose of positive forces, nothing super strong, but definitely noteworthy, before you head into the zero-G roll, which is my favorite inversion on the ride. Now, on the left wing seat in the back where I sat, I got some awesome laterals going through the zero-G roll. It reminded me a lot of the zero-G roll on Fluch der Dämonen, because you're just constantly being pushed toward the left through the entire zero-G roll. It's not that it's really whippy, you're just constantly pushed to the side through it. Plus, you also get some great hang time because it is a slower inversion. This is honestly one of the best zero-G rolls I've done. Then you have an overbank, which is one of the dull moments on the ride. You get a super weak whip going into the overbank, but that's about it. But at the bottom of this turn, just like before, you actually get a really good dose of positive forces. Then you head into this twisted hill, which gives some weaker floater. However, the next element, which is a twisted bunny hill, is much better because this is an aggressive moment of ejector airtime. Not quite as strong as the first bunny hill because that bunny hill is goated. But this twisted bunny hill definitely gives you a fun pop of ejector airtime, and I really like it. Then you have a turnaround, which also pushes you well into your seat with some positive forces before having the final brake run. You don't really get any noteworthy whip into the final brake run, but this coaster has a pretty damn good layout. The ride feels super funky. The forces are so odd, especially when you mix hang time with some laterals and suddenly get some very out of order ejector airtime moments. The forces on this ride don't really feel like they make sense, they just kind of happen. But it's awesome whenever they do. Honestly, a really good layout.
Nothing makes fucking sense.
For the pacing, the speed definitely goes up and down a lot, but the slow parts are slow for a reason. You've got the dive drop, the awesome floater on the bang top hat, the zero-G roll for that matter. Those are great slow moments.
Slow and steady wins the race.
So there are no pacing issues regarding that. However, some of the moments like this overbank are a little slow. And obviously there are some pacing issues regarding some of the elements like this twisted hill with the weak floater, which I thought would be completely forceless, so it was better than expected, but it still feels a little out of place considering you have some much better moments before and after it. So it's not a super consistent coaster, but it's not really a big problem at all because this coaster is good at feeling really weird. Plus, there are way more very good moments anyway. The entire layout is fit pretty well for the speed it takes through those elements. It's really only that hill that feels slower than intended, so it's got a little bit of pacing issues, but they're pretty minor.
The road was starting to be a bit of a test.
Now, this is Lost Gravity's Achilles heel. It is not a super smooth ride, it is very rattly. However, it is not necessarily uncomfortable in any way, for me at least. I can imagine it being a headache-inducing if you ride several times in a short span of time, sort of like on Wildfire, but I didn't suffer any headaches on it. Personally, I actually didn't have any problems with the shakiness at all. The most shaky moment is at the bottom of the first drop heading into the first bunny hill. There you get a sideways jolt. Actually, I thought it was kind of fun. So yeah, it's shaky, but I had no issues with it. It doesn't hurt in any way and just didn't bother me. But I can definitely see where people are coming from. It is a quite new ride still, and it is very shaky compared to how new it is. Sort of like Draukon.
Screw gravity.
Lost Gravity is themed to gravity going berserk. Containers, escalators, things in the ceilings or on the side of things. There's so much stuff here that just screams that they're out of place and have been thrown around by some sort of gravity anomaly. And it's a really cool theme. I mean, that's kind of how the ride feels as well. It throws you in all sorts of directions at slow and high speeds. So really, they picked the perfect theme for this kind of coaster. The layout itself has a little bit of theming as well with the containers and the fire, but mostly the theming is in the queue line. There is also this mirror room, which is just really mesmerizing. The station is hardly themed at all.
Nothing!
But that's okay when the queue line is where the theme is really at. There's also a theme song to Lost Gravity, which I know a lot of people like. Personally, I don't like it. Sue me. Overall, Lost Gravity doesn't have the most complete theme in the world. It is very Walibi Holland-like, but the theming that it has is really cool, and the concept itself is straight up tremendous. So it definitely has my thumbs up.
Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight.
Overall, Lost Gravity is a super fun thrill coaster. It's very funky, very quirky, very different and weird.
My whole life, people have been telling me I'm special.
The layout fits the theming perfectly. It has some great airtime moments. It has even more airtime moments than Goliath, actually. The inversions are both just great, and it's generally got some good intensity. It is definitely not an extreme ride at all, and it's not the smoothest ride either, nor necessarily a mind-blowing experience, but man, does it just hit the right spot anyway. It's just a really cool coaster that delivers some crazy forces that you might not expect. And I'm actually gonna go up and give it a rating of 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a really fun, very rewritable coaster. You gotta go a long way to find anything like it. It's a great overall experience and a cool mix between the theme and how the ride feels, and it just makes me excited to ride more of these. So let me know what you guys think about Lost Gravity in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching this review. Once again, it's been a long time since I last made a review, so glad to get back at it. And otherwise, I hope you guys have a great weekend or weekday or whatever it is for you. Bye!